where we're just going to go and wander through the ins and outs of IEPs versus 504 plans. This is something that comes up a lot. It comes up a lot, and it comes up sadly because so often a 504 plan is going to be offered to a student instead of an IEP because it's more expedient or because it's a lot less expensive. But a 504 plan can work, and I don't want to disparage 504 plans without breaking down for you exactly what they are versus an IEP. An IEP is an Individualized Education Plan or Program, and the thing that's cool about it, it's just characterized by several things. One, it's annual. At least once a year, there's going to be a meeting, and that meeting is going to involve a classroom teacher, special education teacher, a administrative designee, parent, support people of the parent. If there are evaluations and assessments, it's going to involve the psychologist, the speech pathologist, and data is going to be discussed, because when you have an IEP, you get assessments. And from those assessments, there are measurements that enable you to track progress, enable the educators to track progress. All of those things are true of an IEP. An IEP also is great for when services are needed, like speech, like OT. It's absolutely necessary for when a specialized placement is necessary, like a special day class, or when specialized instruction is necessary, like RSP. It comes from an entirely different legislation than a 504. IEP comes from IDEA. And we say IDEA, we don't generally say IDEA. I just mentioned that right now because if you know me at all, you know that I'm really big on making sure when you talk to the district, to the extent possible, signaling that you are that parent, you are that educational rights holder that is to be reckoned with and dealt with, and that they need to bring their A game for. And one of the ways we do that is by using the same nomenclature that the district uses, knowing what some of those acronyms are, throwing those acronyms out just as readily as folks in the district do. So the IEP comes out of IDEA. A 504 comes out of the Americans with Disability Act. Folks have said in talking about the 504 that a 504 plan is an idea. That is a kind of a wish, kind of a dream, kind of a hope. I wouldn't go so far as to say that. However, as we talk about the differences, you'll see they're pretty stark. A 504 plan is not going to get you services. It's not going to get you related services. It's not going to get you specialized academic instruction. It is not going to get you modifications. What does it get you? A 504 plan, even at its best, gets you accommodation, extra time on a test, extra, the ability to retake a test, seating toward the front, maybe the ability to get up and walk around if you need to get up and walk around. And I don't want to disparage the 504 because actually the 504 plan is really great for some limited circumstances, and let me tell you one of them. We have some friends whose kiddos have allergies, really severe allergies. And because of that, from time to time, they're going to miss school. Also, caution really has to be taken that they aren't exposed to some of the allergens that trigger them in the school setting. That's a pretty good case for a 504 because we're going to be able to make sure that you don't get behind academically. We're going to make sure you have your homework. We're not going to ding you for when you're out of class, when you can't participate in this or that activity because it involves something that perhaps you're allergic to. You won't have to. That is when a 504 would be indicated. Here's a scenario, and you tell me what you think. 504 or IEP? Jasmine is in third grade and has dyslexia. She struggles with reading and needs intensive, small group instruction to learn phonics and decoding strategies. The school suggests a 504 plan, but her parents aren't sure if that will provide enough support. Should she have an IEP instead? I'm giving you a second to think about it, but I've got to tell you, I think this is a no-brainer. And the key here is, and let me see the phrase that we used, small group instruction. That's specialized instruction. That's specialized instruction. This young lady needs an intensive reading program. She needs RSP. She may even need a special day class. I don't know. But what I do know is that she is going to need a certain type of instruction that the 504 is not going to give her. So why would anybody even suggest it? Let me tell you why somebody might, and it may feel like it's a legitimate suggestion at the time. Someone might perceive that Jasmine just happens to have an amazing teacher this year, and Miss Jones has it going on, and she in fact is a reading specialist, and she has these kids divided up into small groups, and she has a small group that is just perfect for Jasmine, and Jasmine could really thrive in that setting. And so there might be the temptation to say, well, why can't she just be in Miss Jones' class, gen ed setting, and let Miss Jones do her thing? And it's because a child's educational program cannot depend on the excellence of a single teacher. Just because Miss Jones is amazing doesn't mean that Jasmine doesn't need specialized instruction. And we're, because of that, going to just ask the question, well, what about next year when there's no Miss Jones? A question to ask as a parent when folks are suggesting a 504 plan is where there are deficits, asking, is this proposal that you're making here going to help my child close their academic gap? And perhaps being in Miss Jones' specialized little group that she has this year will be helpful. But we're talking long term. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And again, we can't depend on a single excellent teacher to provide FAPE because she's not going to be in her class next year. Jasmine needs an IEP that includes specialized academic instruction. I almost didn't want to give it any further consideration after I saw the word dyslexia. Dyslexia equals IEP. Dyslexia equals IEP because of the need for that really specialized academic instruction. So here's an additional scenario I'd like you to think about and ask yourself the question, does Joshua need an IEP here or will a 504 work? And Joshua is an 8th grade young man with excellent grades. He is in honors classes. He's in gifted classes. He is on a college track. Joshua also has diabetes. As a result of this, Joshua has to take insulin, and Joshua is sometimes out of school because of hospitalization. There are also days where he is late to school because he's not feeling well in the morning. Mom is very, very concerned and is asking the school for an IEP. They, however, are offering a 504. Will a 504 work for Joshua? So let's kind of go down our laundry list of what Joshua needs. Does Joshua need related services like speech or OT? He does not. Does Joshua need specialized academic services? Does he need a specialized placement, RSP, special day class, non-public school? He does not. Joshua need anything that cannot be provided by accommodation. Extra time to turn in that homework. School packets for the days that he's missing school. Not getting dinged for being late. The ability to go to the nurse's office during the school day. Unless and until Joshua is out of school so often that he actually needs something like home hospital instruction, and that's not what we're seeing here. Unless and until Joshua falls behind academically or starts acting out behaviorally, and that's not what we're seeing here, then a 504 should work for Joshua. Let me just say this though, even where a 504 is indicated, we've got to make sure of some things here. Well, one of the things we need to make sure of is that it is in writing, and that's a pro tip for parents. Get that 504 plan in writing. Any kind of conversation about a 504, any meeting about a 504 that does not result in a writing, that's completely bogus. Also make sure that so often 504 plans, they are written in kind of a column form, 2 columns. And there's a column for what schools are responsible for doing and a column for what parents are responsible for doing. Make sure that the school responsibility is clearly stated and that it is adequate and that it is not a situation where school responsibilities are somehow shifted onto you as a parent or educational rights holder. Otherwise, I think that we should be good. We should be in good shape. We're going to monitor the situation. We're going to see how it's working. We're going to feel free to ask for another 504 modification meeting if it's necessary. One of the difference between 504 versus that IEP is it's really not as clear how often you can have that and whether or not you can call for a 504 meeting on an emergency basis. IEP meeting, my child is having difficulties. I ask for an IEP meeting anytime during the school year. It has to occur within a reasonable period of time, a couple of weeks, 30 days at the most. And that is not the case with the 504. Let me tell you another situation where IEPs have just a lot more punch and a lot more, I don't know, they're just more effective. And that is with the IEPs, you're setting annual goals. You're setting goals. You're looking at present levels of performance. That is, where is the student right now? And then you're setting goals for where the student needs to be. That doesn't exist in a 504. Additionally, if there's a child who's having behavioral issues, the IEP is going to provide safeguards that the 504 will not. If a child has an IEP or needs an IEP and is involved in an infraction of behavior codes from the school or at the school, then before that child can be expelled, a manifestation determination meeting has to be held to determine whether or not the action was a manifestation of the child's disability. If it is, then there is no expulsion. And that's a key and controversial protection for a child who has behavioral challenges. How eligibility is determined for an IEP, how eligibility is determined for a 504. The 504, there has to be something going on that's having a major impact on the child in the school setting. It's a little vague that way. And I would say, and I want to say that, because the child is having difficulty in some way, difficulty keeping up with assignments, difficulty just accessing the curriculum, and they are being impacted in the school setting, but they're being impacted in a way that can be remedied by tweaking here and there. And that's the way I'm going to say it. That they don't need any certain type of specialized academic instruction. They don't need related services like speech, and they don't need modifications of the curriculum, but they are being impacted socially, emotionally, academically, and really it is all part kind of a global how are you doing at school, and tweaking here and there can take care of the issue. Sitting up at the front of the classroom, getting more frequent breaks, having shorter assignments or longer time to do the assignment, that sort of thing. The gateway to an IEP is going to be assessments, and you're going to request those assessments as a parent or educational rights holder. You're going to expect a response from the district within about a couple of weeks, and that response really, it's got to be a yes or a no, and the yes is going to have to be accompanied by an assessment plan. You haven't said yes if you haven't given me an assessment plan. I don't want to hear a verbal yes. I want to see an assessment plan that I'm now signing. A no, similarly, give me a piece of paper. Give me that prior written notice indicating that you're not going to assess the child and why you're not going to be assessing the child. I don't want to hear any blah, blah, blah. So either way, and this is just something that is true for special education, period. We want to have fewer little, passing each other in the hallway conversations, fewer even phone conversations, and more in writing. Because we really want to know where we stand, and we want to be able to hold people accountable when things don't go well. An assessment, which would be a psychoeducational evaluation. It depends on what the suspected area of disability is to determine whether or not it needs to be more comprehensive. Does speech, a separate speech assessment need to take place? Does an ERICS or an EARNS, that's educationally related mental health kind of assessment, need to take place? Even within the psychoeducational evaluation, do we need to specifically test for autism, for example? Listen to that. Listen to that. And the reason I say listen to that is, can you believe, it's just true, that even when you ask for an assessment, there are these layers to it. And it helps for you as a parent or educational rights holder to have some sense of what the area of disability may be. If everything goes well, and the assessments are done correctly, they're done appropriately by an assessor who is appropriately trained and credentialed, and the correct instruments are used, then we can feel pretty confident about the results. And the results will drive whether or not the child is eligible for an IEP. I put all kind of different little caveats in there, all sorts of if, because we at Hope for Families, we sadly do plenty of due process complaints where there has been an educational evaluation and the finding has been that the student is ineligible for services, and we know that that's just plain wrong. When that happens, if in fact the problem is with the evaluation itself, a parent can request an IEE, an independent educational evaluation. Sometimes, however, there's a great assessment and your team is just crazy. I'm sorry, it's just true. We have filed due process complaints where our request was using your own assessment, school district, your own assessment. We are asking you to find this student eligible. You just didn't do it. Why? Why is that? I would say money. I would also say sometimes fear. So let me tell you, there's a divide between the school site and the school district. Downtown, the school board office, the superintendent office. There's a divide. And depending on how dysfunctional a school district is, that divide can cause school sites to make really bad decisions. Perhaps they don't want to appear to have too many children with special education needs. Perhaps they don't want someone from the district to look at their stats and find that they're finding too many people eligible. I've talked to school psychologists, former school psychologists, that have indicated that they'd received memos really hinting quite strongly that we got too many kids being found eligible. And the message seemed to be, when in doubt, find a child ineligible. And sometimes there is an ignorance in the IEP team, just a lack of understanding. Think about it. A teacher goes through these years of training to become a teacher. But unless that teacher actually is training to become a special education teacher, they get this much special education training. And how much special education law training do they get? And then, the same for our administrators as well. As a result, you'll have an IEP team sometimes that's comprised of people who really don't know what the standard is. Oh, he's doing well. He's getting, passing grades. He must not be eligible. Yeah, but he's eloping from the classroom every day. You're calling parent to pick him up at early every day. You actually have a little plan where parent has been asked to agree to pick child up at 11 o'clock and have a shortened day because that's all the child can tolerate. Oh, but that child doesn't need an IEP? That's just ignorance. You don't know. You don't know the standard. So that's another reason why a child might be denied an IEP. There are financial considerations. There's just plain old ignorance. Sometimes there's an evaluation that was done poorly. Any number of considerations. Suppose a child qualifies for a 504 plan and an IEP. Which is better? I'm going to say that any child who qualifies for an IEP needs an IEP. That's just a quick answer. You see, I'm kind of speechless here because I really don't have the opposite argument. I don't have it. It's not like on the one hand this, on the other hand that. If a child qualifies for an IEP, then they need the IEP. Let me just say that there are parents who are hesitant to get the IEP because of stigma that they feel might be attached. There are administrators and teachers that are hesitant about the IEP. I've had parents say that a teacher or administrator has said to them, oh, your child doesn't need an IEP, why would you do that to them? But to me, that sentiment is born of a couple of things. One, it's born of the trauma of the bad old days when a child with an IEP was sent to the quote-unquote retarded room where they were warehoused and did not get educated. And there's a lot of stigma around all of that. That cannot take place any longer. It's not allowed. If it's happening, then action must be taken. That's just an outrage, and it's a kind of an undisputed outrage. We don't do that. So, what's the other reason? And the reason is that a parent may not understand that an IEP is actually a tool. It's a key. It is almost an advantage to unlocking all kinds of services that your child needs, all kinds of placements that your child needs. Let me tell you, just recently in California, students who finished law school were taking the bar exam this past February, and the exam to become an attorney, and it was a debacle, really, really awful. One of the key ways in which it was is that law school students who needed accommodations on the test were sometimes being denied. But let me tell you, you don't even get to discuss those accommodations unless you have a established history of having gotten special education services. So you take your IEP and you say, listen, I've had this from way back. I've needed these accommodations. I've needed these modifications. I had this type of instruction from way back. And I hope this is a hopeful thing, though, too, because I'm saying these are law school graduates that needed these accommodations. And they became law school graduates and they passed law school courses successfully because of the IEP they had, because of the modifications, because of the specialized instruction, because of the related services. And now they're using that history to get what they need, even at this present moment after they've graduated. So you can see an IEP as a tool that's a tool for empowerment and getting what a student needs. Or you can see an IEP as something to be embarrassed about. And I hope that in all of our discussions you've learned that that latter approach, IEP, is something to feel disempowered about and embarrassed about.